Coming to you live from the NowMedia Newsroom.
I'm Jim Check. You're watching NowMedia. With me, Gavin Dew, Conservative MLA for Kelowna Mission. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to talk short-term rentals in Kelowna. A lot of people really wanted to see some flexibility in that, some changes that made in Kelowna Solution, including the councillor that ran for the NDP candidate. They said there needs to be a made in Kelowna Solution. And
no dice.
No dice.
No dice. Yeah, so for those that don't know the background, obviously, the provincial NDP government made significant changes to the short-term rental regulations, and they established this standard, this threshold, where if a municipality wanted to opt out of those provincial rules and have more control of their own, they needed to exceed 3% vacancy 2 years in a row. Yeah. So Kelowna was at 3.8% vacancy last year. They're at about 5% now, roughly. And unfortunately, the way the rules work is even though we're far in excess of the threshold right now, we actually have to wait for the official statistics to come in. The city has to submit an application by March 31st to opt out, and the opt-out isn't effective until November 1st of next year, which means missing an entire summer season.
Yeah. So just because of tick rules, right?
Exactly, because of one-size-fits-all top-down rules set by the NDP, which really don't make any sense for us. So the city of Kelowna, having done their work on this front, having delivered, having outperformed the housing standards that the provincial NDP set, went through their whole process. They had a report to council, and they indicated that they wanted to talk to the province and get an exemption for an early opt-out, which could have allowed us to reactivate some more short-term rental in Kelowna and have a really strong tourism season next summer. So the city did their job. They've got to be good cop on this stuff. They've got to have a good working relationship with the province, and I fully respect that. And I also went to the province, and I actually gave them 3 different ways to do this, which were so incredibly simple. And they said no to every single one of those ways, which I can tell you more about if you want.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that, because I did interview Brenda Bailey a couple of times on short-term rentals over the past couple of years, and it seems like it is a hill they would like to die on. Like, they are adamant. They don't even want to listen, because when Brenda Bailey was here, she presented to the Chamber of Commerce. I think you were at that event as well.
I missed that one, but I heard about it.
Yeah, and there must have been 6-7 questions on short-term rentals, because there was a lot of people concerned about short-term rentals in here. And absolutely, she didn't even like the premise of the question. Never mind answering the question. Didn't even like the premise of the question.
To your point, Jim, I mean, during the election last year, we obviously had all the NDP candidates locally saying that they supported a made in Kelowna solution. And it got to the point where I think David Eby came on your show and basically smacked down his own candidates.
Like, his face kind of turned white when I said, your own candidate is doing that. And that's when Loyal got a phone call. Like right after that.
Yeah, so nonetheless, there's a long precedent here, a long history. I think that people in Kelowna, more than almost anywhere else, understand that we have to strike a balance around this stuff, and that, frankly, we're a tourism-driven economy, and people want to be able to come here. They want to be able to stay in the kinds of places they want to stay. Short-term rental is part of that. It's complementary to hotel. So I thought that I was putting forward the simplest, easiest possible solution to government. And as I said, I gave them 3 ways to do it. So they brought forward a bill called Bill 25, which has amended a bunch of different legislation around housing. It actually opened the Short-Term Rental Accommodation Act. So I brought amendments to that in order to bring forward the effective opt-out date from November 1st to May 1st. Really simple. It's a few months. No big deal. We're literally talking about a less than 1-sentence amendment. They ruled that amendment out of order. Thing number 2, I brought a private member's bill, even simpler. All they had to do was say, okay, we'll debate your bill. I brought a private member's bill that was 1 sentence, amending the effective opt-out date from November 1st to May 1st. They wouldn't debate that bill. They had one more opportunity, and that was that they could literally just have a cabinet meeting. They had a cabinet meeting last Wednesday. And I said, why don't you just bring an order in council, a cabinet order, to fix this problem for Kelowna? And you know what's the craziest thing, Jim? They actually did an order in council about short-term rental last week. They tweaked a bunch of stuff in the short-term rental regulations. But you know what they didn't do? The one thing we asked for. The one thing Kelowna asked for, they literally did a cabinet order about short-term rental, but they wouldn't lift a finger to help Kelowna.
Yeah, like I said, I've interviewed David Eby on it and Brenda Bailey, and it seems like they definitely have a problem. And I asked them both, like they based this legislation on that report that was done by a university or whatever.
For the Hotel Association.
Well, sponsored by, they paid for it. The Hotel Association paid for it. And I asked both of them, I said, isn't that a conflict of interest that the BC Hotel Association is paying for this study that you're relying on for this Airbnb restriction? And they both said no. And then the last time I interviewed, they said, oh, that's not even true. And yeah, so BC Hotel Association had a big logo before, but then it just turned into a little tiny logo.
And Jim, let's be clear. I've got no problem with an industry association advocating for its interests. Yeah. That happens all the time. But as policymakers, you have to strike the balance. You have to recognize that there are all kinds of different property types. There's different kinds of tourists. There's strong data indicating that those two things are complementary. It's not just one thing or the other. And you can see what's happened to our tourism sector. We had a really, really tough summer this year.
I interviewed the owner of Salt and Brick, and I think he owns 3 dining establishments, and he said it just basically cratered his business, right? So he had to choose one to put to sleep.
I think that's what people
chose Salt and Brick, right? But
Jim, that's what people don't understand is that it's not just about landlords or property owners. There's a whole extended ecosystem, right? You've got the restaurants, you've got the cleaners, you've got the handymen, you've got the pool maintenance people, you've got this whole universe of people that are part of our tourism sector and are part of that short-term rental ecosystem. And for a lot of homeowners, it makes the difference between being able to pay their mortgage and not. Heck, we've got people in Aqua, for example, who are underwater $2,000 or $3,000 a month because for 14 years of development, that project was for short-term rental.
Was sold and sold, zoned and sold as that.
Until the Eby government came along and said, never mind your property rights. They didn't grandfather it. They didn't come up with a plan for it. They just decided to hang those people out to dry.
That's Cabana as well, too, right? Like,
absolutely.
There was several properties, I think it's 7, I'm not sure exactly the number, 7 properties in Kelowna that were zoned and sold as short-term rentals. And that's the part that I think a lot of people have a trouble with, right? Because they can't even sell them now. They can't even sell. I mean, Movala is not selling out. Like, same Movala isn't selling out. Aqua's not selling out in Towers 2 and 3. There's lots of inventory sitting now in Caban and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it speaks to, there's the discrete issue of short-term rental itself, but it also speaks to a lack of understanding and respect for markets and for property rights, right? When you've got people that have done the right thing in accordance with the law as it existed, and you're all of a sudden ripping the rug out from under them, that sets a dangerous precedent in terms of retail investment, mom and pop investment into rental properties. It's also the bigger signal. You look at this decision that they have refused to make for the City of Kelowna. City of Kelowna has done exactly what this provincial government asked for. They have outperformed in terms of building housing inventory. They've outperformed in terms of their vacancy rate. And yet, when they ask, and when I asked the government to make such a minor concession that will be good for our tourism sector, that will be balanced common sense policy, they're telling us to pound sand. What signal does that send to any other municipality about whether they should believe this government, that it will hold to its word, that it will cooperate with them, that it will work with them, and that there's any reciprocity? This is a heavy-handed, top-down, one-size-fits-all socialist government that thinks they know best. And increasingly, I think that both municipalities, businesses, and everyday voters are coming to that realization, and they can't wait to get rid of David Eby.
I also talked to Brenda Bailey and asked her the question about, what does this say to investors and that? And she said, well, I mean, there's people that own 27 units. They need to run a hotel. That's what it is. We're building more hotels. And that's what she said. I said, well, I mean, I interviewed the head of Airbnb Canada. And he said 90% of the Airbnbers in Canada have one Airbnb. They're not corporations that have 27 units and stuff like that. But they use that example to drive their narrative.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If you base the entirety of your public policy and the entirety of your political thinking on bad actors, and you treat everybody like a bad actor, then you're not going to have successful and balanced policy. This is what we see over and over again with this government. They don't understand the basics of business. And even when they try to say the right thing, they seem to operate on the belief that business is hostile, that property owners are bad people, that individuals who own homes are bad people, and somehow they must be stopped. The reality is there's a balance here. We have to respect small business. We have to understand what conditions for investment look like. And we have to have some level of respect for basic things like property rights.
I mean, how much pressure is the city of Kelowna trying to put on David Eby and his government?
As far as I know, the city has written to the province and has expressed their desire to opt out early. Let's be honest, I'm bad cop in this scenario. I've got nothing else at stake. I go in and I can hammer the province and I can push them. But for the city of Kelowna and for every other city in this province, they are effectively handcuffed because they look to the province for all kinds of different funding, and they all know
they hold the purse.
Well,
and
the squeaky wheel doesn't get the grease. That's the reality of this government. They're basically holding funding hostage and preventing municipalities from speaking up or from flagging issues. It takes courage for municipal leaders to step up and challenge the government because they know they will be punished by this NDP government.
Lots
believe
of times
they know
when they
best.
do find their voice, it's often too late. Like I'm going to interview the mayor of Crofton here on Friday, and that mill is closing, Domtar Mill, which is 350 high-paying jobs, and basically the lifeblood of that community. And again, I've done tons of stories on forestry, including interviewing the forest minister, Bruce Ralston at the time, and Brenda Bailey at the time when she was jobs. You had your job.
Yeah.
You're the shadow critic for that, but I mean, jobs and innovation. And you got that job back, by the way.
I did, yeah.
And then, and they, kept, saying on forestry that it was, the industry's problem and it wasn't anything to do with fiber, whereas the industry said it's the fiber. And, I said, well, you guys aren't going to the same meetings because, the industry says we don't got fiber. And the EB and the forest minister said, oh, there's lots of fiber. And,
it's funny you mentioned that actually. Last week after that closure, Ravi Parmar tweeted a statement where he acknowledged the role of uneconomic fiber in the closure, and then he deleted it and replaced it with another statement that didn't mention uneconomic fiber.
Fiber is the problem, right? I mean, it's long before Trump. It's been 2 years. I mean, when I did the interview with Kofi, they lost 10,000 jobs in 2 years in forestry, right? And again, we keep pointing to fiber, right? Canfor didn't go ahead with Houston. They said fiber. And, they closed Bear Lake, fiber, right? I interviewed the VP of AP Planers, fiber. And it comes out, and I interviewed Eby and asked him, I said, you can't even get permits to cut burntwood in Merritt. And he said, yeah, and we have a problem there. And then they struck a committee, and I'm sure you're aware, they struck a committee, and what was the complaint from industry? Not enough representation. So they got a bunch of environmental groups in there, and then industry is just like, this is just, if you have billions of dollars in capital, and you look somewhere else, and you say, it might be easier somewhere else.
Well, the problem is that when it comes to forestry in particular, industry keeps on saying fiber, and government keeps on saying Trump.
Yeah.
Everything is Trump as far as they're concerned.
But the problem has been for years prior to Trump.
100%. Years of failed policy, but all they do is blame.
Yeah. They find a straw man, and this straw man is quite effective, I guess.
It's gotten to the point, I think, where the public is really seeing through it, and they're starting to realize, look, absolutely, did Trump's unjustified tariffs have a negative effect on Canada? They sure did. But did he travel back in time and force the NDP to do 8 years, 9 years of economic damage to this province? No, he did not. They made those decisions all by themselves.
So what is the hope, I guess, in short-term rentals? So we got to wait till November, so it's a season gone again. So it's a season for the... I have a friend here that's just trying to get a restaurant job. She can't even get a restaurant. Usually restaurant jobs in Kelowna are easy to get. She can't get a restaurant job right now. And so are we going to go another year of restaurant closures and all that kind of stuff? And because lots of people like Airbnbs, and they'll only go where there's Airbnbs. And so it's not like people don't have choices.
No, it's a complementary offering to hotel. There's lots of role for hotel. There's lots of role for short-term rental. Large family groups, we're often one of them. They want to stay in different types of accommodations. I think it would have been a very easy decision for this government to give the city of Kelowna what they asked for and to make a decision so that people could begin to plan. Because the reality is, just to get up and running, you've got to onboard, you've got to go through a registry. If you're a restaurant, if you're a tourism provider, you actually do need to plan ahead by more than a couple of weeks.
Even staffing, everything.
Yeah,
right?
even the May 1st timeline I suggested, it's honestly probably too late. You really need to know as soon as possible. You need a confidence signal so you can invest. You need to understand what's happening. This government could easily have made that decision at their cabinet meeting. They literally did an order in council on short-term rental and deliberately, willfully excluded what Kelowna asked for, what would have given us hope for a really strong tourism season. I hope to heck that they see better of it and that by their January cabinet meeting, they decide they're going to change it. And you know what, Jim? If they don't, when the House sits again in February, I'm going to come back with another private member's bill. I'm going to come back with more questions. I'm going to keep on pushing them. And if they won't do it, I'm going to make them wear it. And I'm going to make sure that everybody knows that they had an easy choice to help us to get our tourism sector up and running and to give us the simplest, tiniest little bit of flexibility and grace so that we could have a tiny little bit of local control, but they instead chose to stick to their one-size-fits-all, top-down policies, not listening, and frankly, diminishing the trust of any sane mayor or municipality that the NDP is worth anything they say.
There's so many pots on that stovetop unit I talked about in the past. There's so many pots on the stove that are boiling over: healthcare, crime and safety, and then I think one of the pots that is in the center of the stove right now that is in full froth, and that is the DRIPA. Mm-hmm. And you guys are asking them to recall legislature to repeal that. Mm-hmm. What are the chances of something happening there? Yeah,
so what's happened obviously is there's been a series of different, court rulings. There's also been the introduction of legislation like the Heritage Conservation Act, and those things collectively have created tremendous uncertainty on the land base. It's really scary. We're talking about private property owners who don't know whether they'll be able to sell their home or get a mortgage. We're talking about project proponents, major industrial players that can't get finance. And that is creating a bit of a contagion across the entire economy where people are fearful about what that means for land title all across BC. So in that context, we're just trying to get some stability, some clarity here. Our new interim leader, Trevor Halford, came out and insisted that what the premier should do is recall the legislature immediately. We could do it this week. We could do it next week. Heck, we could do it on Zoom, and that we repeal DRIPA. Because what's happened is courts are now effectively ruling that DRIPA, which the government itself said was meant to be symbolic legislation, it was meant to be directional. Now the courts are ruling that it is binding. And we are seeing very serious consequences. So we need to give people back confidence in terms of private property rights, in terms of clarity on the land base. We've said, let's call the House back to order. Let's repeal DRIPA. The Premier has said no. He's going to come back with some amendments that tinker around the margins in February. So people who are waiting for clarity, people whose private property rights have become uncertain, are going to have to wait to February, see what the Premier comes back, see it be debated, and maybe they'll get some relief by then. But in between now and then, I don't think we can afford any more uncertainty, any more doubt, any more risk in a province that already has among the lowest small business confidence, the lowest economic confidence, the lowest consumer confidence in all of Canada.
I mean, EB talks about tons of shovel-ready projects. I watched the interview with him and Vasi Kapelis there talking, like he's, basically saying Alberta is selfish and greedy and wants a second pipeline. And Vasi had a great question for him, like, well, you're having a second LNG. You know what I mean? Like, why can't Alberta have a second pipeline?
Well, let's first flip the premise on its head. David Eby keeps on bragging about how BC has 40% of the projects on their federal major projects list. Okay, maybe that's a point of pride. Maybe it's a problem because we have projects that have been backed up for years under this government. Yeah. I don't know why he's so proud that there are more projects backed up in BC than anywhere else, but that's probably because he is the Premier and Adrian Dix is the Energy Minister who fought Trans Mountain tooth and nail with every tool in the toolkit to stop economic development, to stop the integration of our country, to stop market access, to stop us from being able to actually get world prices for Canadian oil instead of being put over a barrel by Americans who are paying a significant discount. In fact, David Eby and Adrian Dix are personally responsible for subsidizing Donald Trump's American economy through their obstructionism and their refusal to get with the program and get on Team Canada. That's the reality of their record.
Yeah, because that's the thing. The Liberals stand up there and say we need to divest ourselves from the United States of America. And David Eby says that too. We got to get on Team Canada, and here's an opportunity to get our largest GDP that contributes to our GDP or export contributes to our GDP to outside markets. And the province has said no.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. David Eby seems to think that he can get all the benefits of being part of the Federation. He's trying very hard to get military procurement spending from Ottawa into BC, and obviously we want to see that happen. But there's some give and take here. At some point, you have to actually be a team player. Yeah. It is shocking and striking that David Eby was completely cut out of the conversation. BC was assumed to be an annoying child at the children's table who wasn't worth being part of the grown-up conversation when they were negotiating the deal between Canada and Alberta on pipelines. Effectively, David Eby has marginalized himself from Confederation.
Isn't he on the wrong side of this as well? Is this not the wrong hill for him? He's going to die on this hill because most Canadians want this pipeline.
Most Canadians and most British Columbians. I think he's chosen to be obstructionist on this because in some ways I think he's trying to buy himself some credit with environmentalists, because he and Adrian, it actually took me pushing in the legislature to get Adrian Dix to say out loud that Dix and Eby are 100% on board with not only expanding the existing Trans Mountain pipeline, but also with dredging Burrard Inlet to allow fully loaded Aframax tankers to get to international markets. So now they're okay, and they were trying to quietly be okay with the further expansion of a pipeline project. They fought tooth and nail. They're okay with that one, but they're not okay with a northern pipeline that would bring opportunity to communities down that line, that would allow us to further diversify markets, and again, that would be part of that nation-building Team Canada approach.
It's almost like madness, though. It's kind of must be frustrating to sit there. I mean, it's frustrating for British Columbians because it's like most Canadians would choose prosperity over poverty.
You would think.
But it seems like the NDP and the Liberals, many in the Liberal cabinet, would choose poverty over prosperity.
I think, and that for David Eby and the NDP, it's about choosing purity over prosperity, right? They believe that they have an ideologically better understanding than everyday Canadians.
Is poverty.
The outcome is poverty, absolutely. The outcome is lost opportunity. The outcome is diminished opportunity. And I think where it's really striking as well, you know, I see the NDP fixate primarily on major capital projects where they can pick winners and losers. They love being for one pipeline and against another, for one mine and against another. What they don't seem to understand is the fundamental conditions for investment, and in particular, investment by small and medium businesses. Yeah. We've got the lowest small business confidence in Canada. We've got young entrepreneurs who are leaving. We've got record high, generationally high youth unemployment, and they don't seem to really be doing anything about it other than making it worse through the continuation of their totally irresponsible decriminalization experiment that has just laid waste to our small business districts.
I was going to tell you, I was in Tokyo for 10 days in Osaka. And you know what I saw there for homelessness and drug addiction? Zero. Like, and I went out, and I went out every morning. I get up at 3 for some strange reason. I went out every morning, and I didn't want to wake everybody up. I went out for a walk at 3 in the morning, a 2-hour walk every day. And I walked around Tokyo every, different areas in the same walk, and same as in Osaka. And I felt completely safe. Would I walk around downtown Kelowna at 3 o'clock in the morning? Absolutely not.
Exactly. And that has a really dampening effect on the vitality of those small business districts. I think, you talk to small business owners in communities across Canada, and I've done that, and you can literally just see the pain in their eyes. You can see the trauma in their eyes. You can see their exhaustion because they've become so accustomed to another broken window, another stolen safe.
We just did another story for Bright Jenny.
Bright Jenny and DeVille in the same night, right? Both robbed. I mean, this is a brand new coffee shop. It's a great, local business.
They put everything they have into it.
Yeah, only to see that taken away from them. Right. It's obviously wonderful to see the community rallying around them, but it shouldn't take this. We shouldn't have to have this constant expectation, this fear that as a small business, you're going to have to endure whatever comes. You're going to have to literally withstand this hurricane of insanity, this hurricane of unsafety that has been, fire has been thrown, fuel has been thrown on that fire by, again, the decriminalization experiment that David Eby personally pushed.
How can the largest city in the world, and that's Tokyo, how can the largest city in the world, clean, no graffiti, no homelessness, no visible homelessness that I saw, and no drug paraphernalia, no drugs, no everything, very, very clean, and rail that works, and I would sleep on the subway cars. I mean, they look that good. And I rode their maglev train, the Bullet.
The Shinkansen.
And 300 kilometers an hour. It's smooth, it's like on an airplane. And how do they do it? And we can't do it. What's the deal?
I mean, it's different.
What you allow is what you get.
It's different policy choices. It's different cultural choices around what they do deem to be acceptable. I think at some point, if you continue to indulge lawlessness, and if you continue to pretend that perpetuating addiction is a form of compassion, and if you continue to just not have any accountability, you create a feedback loop. And that's what's happened on the streets of British Columbia. We have this terrible decriminalization experiment. We have people who are basically being warehoused in addiction. We have people who are suffering non-fatal non-fatal overdoses that are leading to significant acquired brain injuries that are rendering them effectively children wandering around the streets. And we do not have anywhere near enough of the right kinds of recovery and support resources to get people off the street. We're not doing enough upstream interventions to prevent them from getting there in the first place. And we are all paying the massive cost. And that cost is directly as a result of policy decisions made and pushed by this premier and his government.
And I was going to say, like, a lot of times they just don't want to admit they were wrong, but David Eby did admit he was wrong on decriminalization, although he let it run for another 4 months after that. But they're wrong on the fiber, they're wrong on the short-term rental policy, they're wrong on crime and safety, they're wrong on healthcare. I mean, healthcare, you and I have talked about healthcare how many times? I mean, that's another stove that's just boiling over, stovetop.
Yeah,
pot.
I think, to your point, Jim, they've painted themselves into a corner. They have difficulty admitting that they are wrong. And in all fairness, it's very hard for any government to change direction because they've been so set in the same direction for years. Mm-hmm. How do you tell everybody in the healthcare system that we screwed up for 8 years and now we're changing our minds and turning the corner? How do you tell them all we screwed up on decriminalization, so now we're going the opposite direction? How do you tell them all we screwed up on forestry, so now we're changing direction? The reality is the only way we're going to get back on track, the only way we're going to get our economy humming again, the only way we're going to actually get a reset is if David Eby is gone.
And that brings us to you and the Conservatives. Big changes. You and I talked last time. John Rustad had just resigned at the time. It's been about a week now, I think, since we talked. A little bit of the dust is settling. I see John is still kind of tweeting in support of the Conservative Party, which is a good sign to see, right? That he hasn't splintered off and says, well, I'm going to start another party. So we have like 6 Conservative parties going here in BC. So, I mean, that's a good sign. But anything you can share with British Columbians on where the Conservative Party is heading? And does it look like we're bringing the fractures back in, like the Eleanor Sturcos and Amelia Boltbys and...
Yeah, great question, Jim. Obviously, it was a very difficult couple of days last week as we worked through that leadership transition. I think John ultimately did the right thing. I think that he was, very graceful in his exit, and I do think that we have to acknowledge everything that he did to bring our party to where it is today. That's important. It was a very cathartic couple of days. I think, so far we've seen everybody in the caucus remaining intact. Yes, there were tears. Yes, there were hugs. Yes, there were, harsh words at times. But everyone really has come together, and we are dedicated to the same mission, which is getting rid of the NDP and forming a new government. Now, the challenge ahead is we are going to go through a leadership contest in the new year, which not only will that produce a new leader, but it also is our opportunity to show the public that we are growing and maturing and ready to lead, and that we are truly a government in waiting. So we've got to get that right, Jim. We've got to make sure that, leadership contests are a little bit like talent competitions. I always joke that, Kelly Clarkson didn't win American Idol, but it made her famous. Yeah. So sometimes what happens is you end up with people within the caucus who run, and that kind of solidifies their position. Sometimes you get people that are not in the caucus, they run, and they end up being pulled into the caucus. And I think it is a really fertile time in that regard. There are some great people putting their names forward. It's coming together well. I'm hopeful we're going to have a really constructive, positive process that, again, is going to show us maturing and growing up in front of the eyes of the public and becoming that, not the NDP, common sense, free enterprise party that historically has been very successful at running this province well.
Yeah, I think one of the better outcomes would be a lot of leaders that look good, so that you have, like picking a good team, you know what I mean? Like, and then all of a sudden, you have a strong leader, but also the strong supporting cast that goes with that leader. That's
a really good point, Jim. Right at the end of the day, leadership is never a solo job. Right, the job of leaders is not to create more followers; it's to create more leaders. Yeah. If you have more people who are leaders with you, they're going to be more successful. And I think, that is what we have to show the public going into the next election. They have to be able to look at us and see not just a leader, but a strong cabinet who they can have confidence will run those key files well, who can work together, who are a team, who are economically literate, informed, experienced, common sense leaders as a group. So I hope, again, that we'll have lots of great people coming into the race and offering themselves as, whether it be as future leaders or as future cabinet ministers. I'm really optimistic about the kind of talent we're going to see.
It looks like on the internet there are some people kind of like throwing their name out there, and I saw Caroline Elliott sister-in-law to Kevin Falcon, I believe. I think, she's kind of thrown out some kind of like draft kind of like video out there. So obviously she's looking at it. And then Christy Clark posted a very weird looking tweet with her hand up and saying it's time for leadership. And I'm just wondering, is Christy Clark throwing her name back in the ring there?
Yeah, I don't get the impression that Christy Clark is looking to run again.
That's a weird tweet if you go look at it.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one, but this is, I've been through this before. I ran to lead the BC Liberal Party previously, and I've been involved in other campaigns. This is sort of the phase, I call this the phony war phase of the campaign. Yeah. It's where everybody is posturing, everybody is making up, everybody is trying to signal strength. They're trying to signal that they have big teams. They're trying to signal that they can fundraise. They're kind of jockeying for position. You'll hear people who will put their names forward and then realize that they just don't have traction and pull out. You'll see people, making decisions over the next number of weeks. And then I would assume that by the time January rolls around, we'll sort of see, the real field begin to shape up. Yeah.
Can you put that tweet up there? I just want to show it because it looked weird. So I was like, I know that Mario Canseco did that poll, and you and I talked last time. Your name was in that poll as well, and you polled quite strongly. And Christy Clark's name was in there as well, and as was Eleanor Sturko, and a few people that I didn't know that. So there you go, or you can see it on that screen there. It's a weird looking tweet.
Yeah, I think obviously Christy's reflecting on the launch of her own leadership campaign in 2011. Yeah. That was a very transformative time for the BC Liberal at that point. They were in a really, they were in a real struggle because after a number of terms in government, it was kind of assumed that they would lose. And to her credit, Christy basically brought the BC Liberal Party back from the brink and rebranded it. That extended their franchise by another term. I think we're in, it's a different situation right now, but it's equally transformative. We had the fortune of, we rode the Poilievre wave to some extent during the last election.
Blue sign helped.
Yep, people were very frustrated. Yeah, people were very frustrated with David Eby. Our timing was perfect. In some ways, we rode the Pierre Poilievre wave that Pierre himself did not get to ride. Yeah. We also had a strong team come together, but now we've got to consolidate. We're in a spot where we are the official opposition. We have, I've said before, we have a right of first refusal on completing the process of becoming that free enterprise coalition, that common sense coalition, that not the NDP coalition. But we have to do the work to get there, and we have to show the public.
Campaign slogan, not NDP?
I think that's everybody's campaign slogan, Jim, not the NDP. And the reality is this, though. People are sick and tired of the NDP. They're done. This is a government that is
history shows that too, though, right? History shows that. Long in the tooth, for sure. Long in the tooth. And sometimes you get away with long in the tooth when you put a fresh leader in like they did with Carney. And then, direction, and then you find a good straw man. But I fail to see where David Eby's going to come up with that. He looks like beaten. It doesn't look good as a person right now.
And that to me is a very fertile opportunity. Again, I think British Columbians are growing increasingly tired of David Eby. They're weary of his government. They're worried about their future, and they are looking for a serious alternative. I think it is on us. We have the opportunity as the Conservative Party of BC to finish that process of growing into what voting British Columbians can see as safe change, safe hands, a government in waiting, ready to turn the province around. But we cannot take that for granted. We have to make sure that we get through this leadership process. And again, it's not just about who's in it. It's about the story we tell. The story we tell needs to be one of consolidation, not conflict. It can't be a civil war. It can't be about tearing each other down. It has to be about
one mission,
uniting around one mission. And that mission is to defeat the NDP and turn the province around.
I think it has to be about one mission for sure, right? And we'll end with you got your old rollback Jedi. I know you like that acronym, right? The Jedi Warrior.
Absolutely, Jim. So we had a small cabinet shuffle, or shadow cabinet shuffle today. Trevor Halford, who's been doing a great job as interim leader so far, made a couple of minor changes. He had previously been serving in the transportation critic role. Harman Bangu's taken over there. My role has expanded again back to being jobs, economic development, and innovation, or JEDI. And then I've also taken on artificial intelligence as well, which is a really interesting file that I'm quite passionate about.
Something that's lacking in government intelligence. Might as well get some artificial stuff, right?
Exactly. Well, there's huge opportunities, obviously, in AI, but there's also great challenges as we look at things like skills bias, job dislocation.
You have lots of knowledge in that field for sure.
I mean, what you're saying is I'm a giant nerd, and I willingly accept that title.
I am as well, right?
I'm a guy who fought to have my title be Jedi. You can tell I'm a big nerd.
Hey, I'm just the same, and it's tech is going to, I think, save us from ourselves even sometimes, right? So, and and I think you have a passion for small businesses as well.
Well, look, it's small business, it's innovation, and I think to your point around tech saving us, we've got to realize that tech is not a vertical, it's a horizontal. Tech is in everything, and we have to stop this silly narrative where we pretend that our resource sector is going to go away and be replaced by abstract tech jobs. Tech is a huge part of every aspect of our economy. It's tentacles
into everything, right?
Exactly, and it's a way that we can enable an even stronger, resource-based sector, stronger ag sector, stronger everything. We need to be more innovative, but we'll only be innovative if we keep innovative people here and we show them that this is a place where they can be successful. And what I worry about right now is that they're leaving. So we need to really change direction. We need a clarion call. We need a culture change. We need to tell people that BC is happening again and that they need to be here, stay here, build here, grow here, because this is the best place on earth.
Renee and I do be on the ballot, and Ian and I do the really big show in the morning, every morning at 9 a.m. I'm going to plug that. But the thing we say on both of those shows is energy is everything. And we have abundant energy in Canada. We just have no political will right now to tap the stuff beneath our feet. I know you talk a lot about land-based, like all of our wealth is in our land base. And how do we tap that? And how do we exploit those resources for the betterment and for the prosperity of all Canadians?
Yeah, amen, Jim. Look, you're talking my language. Yeah. Our province, our country, we have such an incredible endowment of resources, whether that be on the mining side, oil and gas, forestry, agriculture. We have so much here, and it is only our own self-limiting beliefs that prevent us from being the richest country on earth.
It's the political will that's lacking.
Exactly. So we've got to turn that around. Policy is downstream from politics. Politics is downstream from culture. We need culture change. We need to get our mojo back, and we need to actually start believing in this province again.
And I'm going to plug myself. AI is the most important thing that is going on in its technology. And the biggest thing AI needs is energy. It's all about energy, right? And then some of these big U.S. tech companies are looking for energy, and they're firing up 3 Mile Island, right? Because they want the energy, right? And we did a piece yesterday, I think it was. A guy invented a super blaster LNG motor that's creating like 42 megawatts. And he's got an order for 1.2 gigawatts, which is enough to power 1 million homes, right? Wow. So this is all off LNG. And what do we have? We seem to have some LNG, right? So we could be a hub for tons of AI data centers.
But, the way the government has approached it has been a very scarcity-oriented approach. I've joked before that they're rationing electricity like wartime butter, right? We have to live in a world of abundance. We have to start producing energy, and we have to, frankly, catch up, because we are letting everybody else eat our lunch when it comes to data centers, when we could have such a huge opportunity there, both for domestic compute power. We could be exporting compute to Asia. We've got clean, green power opportunities. There's so much we could do, but again, we just have to start believing that it's possible and doing it.
I promise this is my last one. Down in the United States, energy prices are coming down because Donald Trump watches our show, obviously, because he said this yesterday. Energy is everything, just like you've been watching the show, buddy. But energy is everything, and energy prices coming down in the United States. Fortis just announced yesterday, we did the story, energy prices for Fortis going up by 11%.
Yeah, look, affordable, accessible electricity is the foundation of a strong economy. You think about what actually makes a market economy work. It's property rights, it's affordable energy, and it's the innovation. You need those things, right? You need people to know. You need people to know what they own so they can collateralize loans, get debt, build things, do things. They need to be able to power up those things if they're going to produce anything. And you need to keep smart people here and not drive them away. We've got to get those three right. And if we don't, we're going to have serious problems.
Do we have any of those right now?
I'd say we have opportunities for improvement on all those fronts, Jim.
Well, there you go. And I do thank you for your time. You're always very generous with your time. And we appreciate that, and being our MLA here in Kelowna Mission as well. And Merry Christmas to you and yours and everybody at the Ledge.
Merry Christmas. Great to see you, Jim.
All right. Thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent.